I stood looking down upon the world I once knew below me. But all that had ever been was gone. In its place was the dead, and soon I knew I would join them. I looked towards Valentine, who still had a smile upon his face. My mind raced with all sorts of thoughts, but none were to do with me and my future, but Dr. Valentine's. My anger grew deeper and deeper as his smile grew across his face like a Cheshire cat. I felt my blood boiling. I knew that any moment I would burst, and all the anger of the killing of Jenny and the Overgates would overtake me, and I would be left only with the conscience of rage unleashed. Before I had time, maybe Valentine had read the upgrowing rage in my eyes as my body prepared myself like a rocket ready to be launched. He took out his gun and placed it straight for me. Harkin saw the gun and started running down the hill to the city below, but Valentine didn't flinch. He wasn't interested in him, but in me. The man who had killed his brother. He fired. In the millisecond moment I moved my head, and I felt the air that the bullet pushed brush past my ear. And then I launched myself straight at his body, and we both went tumbling down the hill. The gun flew into the air, and then it was gone. Valentine and I grappled for one another. It was not long before our hands were covered in mud and blood. I laid a firm fist with all my force to his face. He screamed with agony. I felt my blood boil, and a sense of well-being came over me as I transferred my anger into the man who had ignited it. "This is your time, Valentine. This is your time. Now I shall give you a taste of your medicine. You will reap the rewards of your mercies. Meet your death, Valentine. Meet it well." I laid another punch into him, but he moved his body, leaving my fist firmly in the ground. He stood up and retrieved a long knife that looked more like an axe than a knife, and launched it straight at my back, of which it firmly implanted itself. I screamed out with pain. Harkin was still running, shouting and screaming, whilst Valentine and I battled each other. For only one of us would survive this onslaught. One of us would be of the living, and the other would return to the soil from whence he became. He pulled the long knife out of my back, my blood dripping from the shiny, spotless blade. I turned and charged straight at him, knocking the blade into the air. He fell to the ground. I looked up and placed my hand up. The falling blade slit through my palm, but I had a firm hold of it. It symbolized. It had become part of me, like symbiosis. It had become part of me, and I raised my arm up above his head. For the first time, his eyes lit up with fear. "Bishop, no, Bishop, let me live, let me live." But the balance of my arm had only one direction. It would fall, and with the full force it came slicing down upon his head. It cracked his skull, and then like jelly it oozed. As it penetrated beneath, he yelled with agony. And as he did so, my mind brought an image when I had killed a rat in my garden some months before. It had been injured, and unlike usual I was able to creep up on it, and with a handy broom I brought the full force of my arm down upon it. It squealed in pain, and then transfixed at its pain and what I had done, I paused before I put it out of its misery. As those images came back to me, I saw Valentine's face, reeling in pain. I tried to move my hand from the blade, but we were all conjoined. We had become one, I, the blade, and Valentine. What I had done, I thought, as I moved my other hand to try and hold his head back together, but the blade, like a hot knife in butter, was splitting it open. I tried to pull my hand from the blade, but as I did so another crack came. Valentine screamed a high pitch, like an animal in distress, and grabbed hold of my arm to keep me in place. "I knew you had it in you," he said, as his last cry of pain was cut short, and he was dead. I tugged at the blade, trying to pull my hand free, and a hand came from behind and held the blade, allowing me to slip my hand away. It was Harkin. I stood up and dusted myself down, not noticing that I was painted, that my clothes were painted with the blood of Valentine. In full view of Harkin, I looked at his face and looked down upon my clothes to see what I had done. "Who killed him?" said Harkin. I didn't answer him. All I could think of was what Valentine's last words were. "I knew you had it in you." What had he meant? But it was all too clear what he had meant. He knew that he was a carrier, that his death would be slow and painful, and had come back to me in order that I would kill him quickly, as death was the one thing he was certain of. Even in his last act, he had the last laugh. Jenny was dead, the Overgates, now Valentine. Harkin and I were all that was left. We returned back to the place I had left the bus, and I took some explosives that Jenny had got from the abandoned lorry that I now knew Harkin had left, and planted them around a school nearby. I lit the touch paper and ran back to the bus, where Harkin sat waiting. He said to me, "What you done?" Before I had time to answer, the building blew up, and bricks hit the roof of the bus as I started the engine and we drove off. I had done as I said I would to Jenny. I did it for her memory. The fiery red furnace burnt away as the embers rose to the sky, as the soul does the body. We said goodbye to the place where we had lived, and we set to move over to the next, to meet the Scraggs that Valentine had talked of. But what our hopes were I am not sure, for Harkin had said there was no cure for the disease he had let upon this earth, and so we drove away from the dead city, which had once been my home.